Rhetorical listeners, and welcome into another episode of the Big Rhetorical Podcast. For this episode, we're talking to Dr. Paul Cook at Indiana University Kokomo about his upcoming event, the Mindfulness, Media, and Misinformation in the Digital Era Symposium. It's going to be Friday, September 13th, 2019 at Indiana University Kokomo over in Kokomo, Indiana. It was really great to talk to that guy and get to know him better and more about this conference and to hear more about what the good folks over in IUK are doing with this symposium, which looks like it's going to be a really great event. I'm looking forward to it. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice or not, but I'm a little bit tired this week. That's right. We are now into the semester, completed the first week of fall 2019. My business and government writing students, I met them. They're great. I met my class of English 249 students. That's technical and professional writing, and they're great. I will say these are two very different classes with their own personalities, as evidenced by our Spotify playlists that we published. I went ahead and listened to those, and I'm happy to report that I feel like I know my business writing students, which is great, but I don't know who the students in my technical communication class are after listening to their playlist. It was quite eclectic. I'm excited to learn more about them based on their music choices. So, one of the things I've been thinking about as we get into this semester is how we think about assigning new media texts in terms of accessibility, and not necessarily accessibility from a disability standpoint, but more in terms of a financial implications on the student standpoint. I feel like I've noticed more instructors assigning texts that students can only find on Netflix, and I just want to make sure I caution instructors to think about the implications of assigning texts that are only available on streaming sites that people have to pay for to access the video archive. But what about when you assign an entire film that's only available through those major streaming platforms like Hulu, Amazon? This is an ethical quandary, and there's a ton of different perspectives, but for me, it seems to be a bit unethical. Now, there's a ton of work done on this topic, for sure. And oftentimes, I make the assumption that everyone has a Netflix account. The truth is, though, not everyone has that account. What is even more absurd, personally, for me, is that I don't even have a Netflix account. I borrow from a friend. I still think it's important to work new media into the classroom curriculum, so how do we do that ethically? There are tons of workarounds to this issue, sure, but I have found the one that works for me is using the streaming service provided by the university library. Illinois State University uses Canopy, and it has a great selection of educational films, documentaries, and independent films. At one point, it even had access to the Criterion Collection. While I'm not sure if it's still available there, this platform seems to have a variety of media that could be used for a variety of activities and projects in the classroom, whether that's a writing classroom or a literature classroom. So, before you choose to assign a new media text only available on Netflix, consider the alternatives, alright? There are workarounds, and I found using Canopy to be quite successful, and the best part is that I have access to Canopy too, so I have this entire media archive to explore for myself. So, back to Paul Cook though. Paul was outstanding to chat with, and I enjoyed that. I do want to mention one more time that he's at the Indiana University Kokomo, and we're talking about the Mindfulness, Media, and Misinformation in the Digital Era Symposium that'll take place on September 13th. Here's my conversation with Paul Cook. who are you, and what is your institutional affiliation, your title, and your role with the event?
Okay. Well, first of all, let me just say, I think this is such a cool idea that you're doing here with this podcast showcasing all these different conferences and symposia and workshops. My name is Paul Cook, and I'm an associate professor of English at Indiana University, Kokomo. My role in this goes back at least a year and a half or so, and it's a bit convoluted, so I'll spare you a lot of the sort of institutional subtleties of how this came to be. But essentially, I am part of a team that includes the provost on our campus, the associate vice chancellor on our campus, as well as our dean of the library. And it's essentially a kind of a blanket information literacy, digital information literacy type initiative, where we are essentially kind of overseeing the way that students are taught to interact with and handle information in first year writing courses and also in the different library guides and library workshops and sessions. So it's kind of a coordinated across campus effort in that way. We've done a lot of work as a team. Part of, well, I suppose the most notable thing would be that we secured a $50,000 grant from the Rita Allen and RTI Foundation back in the fall of 2018.
Oh,
and that
fantastic.
grant is to develop a series of curriculum to deal with the larger problem of misinformation in society. So this particular symposium is kind of a direct outgrowth of that larger project that's been happening on our campus for probably going back to about 2015, as a matter of fact. And all of that is connected to something called the American Democracy Project, which you may be familiar with, ADP.
I am.
Yes. Okay. So we're also, in the larger sense, part of or one of the campuses that's involved in the Digital Polarization Initiative, working with Michael Caulfield, who you may have noticed is also our keynote speaker. So
yes. I'm familiar with Michael Caulfield, and I'm glad to see he's the keynote speaker there at Mindfulness Media and Misinformation in the Digital Era. Why did you choose Michael to be the keynote speaker, and what are you excited about when it comes to his work and his scholarship and what they bring to your conference?
Well, Michael is fantastic, and at this point, I would be remiss if I didn't mention my colleague and partner in crime on this whole thing, because you can't do one of these alone, and that's Polly Boroff-Jones, the dean of our library. She's been working right there with me this entire time. And she and I both together, I guess, met Michael back in 2015 or so at the CLDE, the Civic Learning and Democratic Engagement Conference. And we got to know him through a workshop there. And we started at that time talking with him about possibly coming to campus. And over the years, as this idea has kind of gained some momentum, when we decided to have a conference, we said, well, obviously the person that we're going to choose is Michael Caulfield. And I just saw him a few months ago at this year's CLDE in Fort Lauderdale, and we talked there about kind of what we have planned. And so, we're excited about having him. I suppose what most excites me about bringing Mike to campus is that his approach is so practical. It's so kind of hands-on, and it's so, for lack of a better term, and I would put quotes around this, common sense, in the way that I think it translates widely for an audience, and you don't have to be a rhetoric and composition specialist or someone who's studying literacy at a high level or something like that, or even someone who's involved in education to make a lot of sense of what Mike's trying to do. And so I think, what we're going to have him talk about, is something that really, and it's often said, but that I think cuts across disciplines.
I think conference goers are going to be in for a real treat with Michael's keynote address there, for sure. Go ahead, please.
Well, I just wanted to add, he's also doing, in addition to his keynote, which will be at lunchtime, he's doing a workshop that afternoon.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. And so he'll have a chance to kind of do a more in-depth overview of both, I suspect, the four moves in a habit and also SIFT, which
Let
is
me ask,
the new model.
do you have any further information on what workshop attendees might get from that experience?
Well, we did talk about it a bit. So the workshop, again, it's for everyone, from faculty on down to students. In fact, we're really hoping for a wide kind of type of attendance with a lot of different types of folks across campus. I'm pretty sure that he's going to. Well, he did mention to me that he was going to talk about on a somewhat lighter note, the planned Area 51 in the desert. There's going to be a bunch of people.
We'll be there too, though, right, Paul?
Well, yeah, perhaps in spirit. So he did mention in our last meeting that he wanted to talk about that a bit, and
fascinating.
I think it's going to be an interesting talk.
In the CFP, it says that this symposium seeks to bring together a diverse group of scholars, teachers, and thinkers from around the state of Indiana and beyond to discuss pedagogical strategies and solutions to help today's college students cope with, quote, network propaganda of all kinds, end quote. So what are some examples of these strategies and solutions, and what should conference goers expect from some of the presentations they're going to see?
Well, and you'll note the quotes around network propaganda. I think this really points to one of the central difficulties of talking about this, is that we first have to really define our terms. And right. The information universe out there now is so diverse and so complex that, you know, those old categories and those old terms don't really work anymore. And so I'm hoping that what we can do, in keeping with the kind of open access nature of this symposium, is to offer participants at both ends of the spectrum. On the one hand, the kind of information literacy 101, you know, here are the basic terms. This is what we mean by misinformation, and this is how that differs from so-called disinformation or from corporate propaganda, advertising, you know, framing in ways that are, you know, not completely on the level, and so forth and so on. Here's what we call those things. Here's how to suss out the different types of network propaganda or problematic information. On the one hand, so that would be, you know, for folks who's like, you know, I'm totally new to this stuff. I've kind of heard of this thing called fake news, but right. That's kind of the extent of it. On the other hand, I think, and this is where having Mike do both a keynote and then do a more in-depth workshop in the afternoon comes into play. I think we'll also have a lot to offer folks who are more advanced, who have been living with these kinds of things, who maybe even have kind of come up with some of their own course projects or curriculum on their own and taught it successfully, to say, hey, you know, here's something that I can learn something new, explore a new concept, hear about a successful intervention on some other campus that maybe I can steal or, borrow from, you know, and something that, you know, or perhaps I can tweak something that I'm doing on my end as well. So we hope, in short, that we're able to reach folks who are brand new to this and people who have been teaching about problematic information in the digital era for quite some time.
Your CFP asked such an important question in asking what are our responsibilities as teachers and literacy advocates in this era, right? And then also, how might we reconceptualize our roles against a societal backdrop of declining trust in professions and institutions? So what are some of the answer to these questions from you, and then what are conference goers going to hear from presenters?
Yeah, well, and I hope that these are the right questions that we should be asking. I mean, I think one of the reasons why this you could perhaps accuse it of being a bit general, but in some ways I think I would say fundamental. I mean, these are kind of fundamental questions. So let's not, you know, assuming nothing, assuming that we are in fact approaching an era of information and disinformation and the weaponization of information on a level that we've never seen before in human history. Mm-hmm. Assuming that, what will teaching look like in a decade or perhaps less?
Sure.
What will it mean to be a quote literacy advocate? What will it mean to be someone who cares about the process of literacy as a means of liberation and achieving some kind of greater human understanding? And these seem sort of generic, but they're also, I think, very important, because I do think that what we think of as teaching has already and will continue to undergo some very radical changes.
It changes every day, I
Right.
think,
Yes,
like,
exactly. Exactly.
so one of the things that I want to highlight from your CFP is that the mindfulness, media, and
Yeah.
misinformation in the digital era um, symposium is going to have a special guest. Do you mind filling in listeners who that special guest is and why she was chosen for the conference?
Absolutely. So this would be Phyllis Noodleman. She's the executive director of the American Democracy Project, and we are extremely excited and fortunate to have her coming. She is someone who clearly has a very strong vision for what I'm talking about, and what we're interested in really exploring here, which is in the future, what will be, in the near future, what will be the role of those who are interested in literacy as a means of human liberation, and ultimately trying to find some sort of common ground where we can communicate.
I think that that's going to be fascinating to hear what she has to say and kind of bring, I guess I'm saying this right, an industry perspective perhaps to the
Yeah,
conference.
yeah, I think that's fair. Absolutely.
So for potential presenters who are not familiar with Indiana University Kokomo, the city of Kokomo, or the Mindfulness Media and Information in the Digital Era Symposium, how is your project team working to be an accessible conference for all attendees?
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked about that. This is the first time that Polly and I have done this on our campus. I think each of us has had some experience putting on an event like this, but not at this level and not on this particular campus. So we have done a couple of things that I think will make this something that is accessible for everyone. For starters, we worked very closely to make sure that we were keeping, that we have plenty of open spaces, open classrooms for folks. We were very careful about looking into different dietary restrictions and allergies. Of course, everything on our campus is 100% accessible. We have a link, and if you go to the program tab in that link, and I'll be happy to send this to you. It's iuk.libguides.com. It'll take you right to this. Let me see here. It'll take you right to this LibGuide. If you scroll down to M for mindfulness, media, and misinformation in the digital era, and click on that, you'll see the home and registration and hotel and program. There's a lot of information there. There's also a directions tab. We give folks directions from all points. We are sort of located just about 45 miles north of Indianapolis, in Kokomo, Indiana. And so we have directions. So we're right there in that kind of just north central part of the state. And we have directions from everywhere from South Bend, from Gary in the Chicago area, from Indianapolis, from Richmond, which is east, from Bloomington, which we have some folks coming up from IUB, or from New Albany, which is way down in the southern part, right near Louisville, Kentucky. Everyone can also find registration and hotel information in the registration and hotel tab. We have a block of rooms at the Hampton Inn and Suites from September the 11th through September 13th at the rate of $114 a night, and all of that information is available there through that LibGuide. We also ask that everyone please take a moment to fill out the free registration. It is required so that we can plan for lunch and refreshment breaks and stuff.
Could you briefly describe your guidelines for people who want to sign up? So it's a free registration to attend,
Absolutely.
and they just can follow the link there. I'll tweet it out.
Yeah, so there's a link there, and there's actually I can send you a bit the shortened link version of just it's a Qualtrics survey. Very quick and easy to fill out. We ask that folks just, if you plan to come, please fill that out by Tuesday, August 27th, if at all possible. And so we can plan. We do have a good bit of space available still. So, and it is free, and that includes all 3 meals. And we have refreshments throughout the day, and of course, plenty of coffee and
Awesome.
tea. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, what do conference goers have to look forward to in Kokomo? What do we need to do and see while we're in
Oh,
town?
well,
Community sites, events,
yeah,
anything like restaurants?
we have a really charming downtown area that has a lot of different, let's see, there's a few places down there that I like a lot. There's a number of places actually out by campus that you can visit. We have an absolutely gorgeous park system, and that time of year, September in Indiana, is usually the most temperate and beautiful time of the year in this part of the country. So you could spend some time there or on campus. And the day of the symposium, we're going to wrap things up with an all ages event at the Tin Man, which is a local brewery in town, with a networking event that begins on Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock. And that'll just be a chance for folks to see some of downtown Kokomo and to see more of the city, and then to interact and network. And hopefully, I'm hoping, make plans for doing this again next year.
So, you mentioned where we can find you at LibGuides, but can listeners and potential conference goers find you online, social media, website, email, anything else you want to add?
Yes, we do have an email address that you are welcome to email us at. It's cfp19 at iuk.edu. That's cfp19 at iuk.edu. And I check that regularly, so please feel free to email.
Thanks, Paul. Anything else you want to mention about the symposium or the experience before I let you go here?
Well, the only thing that I didn't really get a chance to talk about is the mindfulness aspect of this. So I talked a lot about the media and the information and the misinformation aspect, but not much about the mindfulness. And this is something that we're, I suppose, most excited about, because we believe that mindfulness may be a way through, if you will, the kind of information minefield that we find ourselves in now, both as students and as teachers, and also just as citizens and people who have to kind of, swim in this soup together, so to speak. And so we're really hoping that we can emphasize and carry forward that notion of mindfulness as we embark on something that is quite new. And we have a number of panels here that are taking seriously the call to think about how mindfulness can be used to intervene in these larger problems. So
I feel like when I've been looking at CFPs and some of the work that's been going on in the field right now, mindfulness as a concept, as a construct as well, continues to kind of come up here and there. So I'm glad to see that this symposium is dedicating a great deal of time to that specific thing.
You're absolutely right about that. And in fact, I should point folks out to a recent special issue in the online journal Across the Disciplines that's on contemplative writing pedagogies. If you're interested in this sort of thing, and you're someone who's in the discipline of rhetoric and composition studies, that would be an excellent starting point for kind of learning more about this whole notion of mindfulness and contemplative writing pedagogies. That was the issue of Across the Disciplines that came out just this summer. It's the special issue.
Okay, great. So listeners can check that out now.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, thanks so much for talking to me today. Appreciate that, and I hope to see you in Kokomo in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for the opportunity of talking to you and for getting the word out about mindfulness, media, and misinformation in the digital era.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, so that was my conversation with Paul Cook over at Indiana University Kokomo. Want to thank Paul for joining the podcast. He reached out to me a little bit late in their process, but we were lucky enough to be able to squeeze Paul in and talk more about his conference over at the University of Indiana, University Kokomo. One thing I will mention is that after I talked to Paul, he reached out to me a few days later to let me know that we inspired him to start a Twitter account for his symposium. The handle is at 3M Symposium. Of course, those three M's being mindfulness, media, and misinformation in the digital era. Just one more reminder that that's going to be Friday, September 13th, 2019. And a lot of times when I sign off talking to someone, I'll slide in a comment like, well, see you there, or see you in Kokomo, or looking forward to it. And in the case of the Mindfulness, Media, and Misinformation in the Digital Era Symposium, I'm happy to report that all of those things are actually literally and figuratively true. Since Kokomo is only about 3.5 hours from me here in Bloomington, Illinois, I'm going to make the trip over to Kokomo and join Paul and the rest of the good folks over at IUK for the symposium on September 13th. So, if you're going to be there, we're going to be there. If you see us, please reach out and chat with us, and hopefully we'll get to talk to you and some really great people there at the symposium. So, we'll see you in Kokomo. Hey, the Big Rhetorical Podcast is now on Pocket Cast. So make sure to, when you find the Big Rhetorical, wherever you get podcasts, to like, share, and make sure to leave a review. As this project takes shape, we want to get our name out there. And help us out by doing some of those things for us, whether it's on Stitcher, Google Play, iTunes, Spotify. Get out there, give us a like, write a review for us. We'd appreciate it. Okay, I think that's it. I feel good about it. I'm going to put it out there. So until next time, be kind to one another and always be listening rhetorically.